What's up, Reds fans, and welcome in to the Locked On Reds podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Carr. Today, we're going to talk about Joey Votto and his 1,000th RBI. We're also going to talk about a loss and the Reds against the West and how much we're so glad to see that end. Well, they do have some games against the Dodgers coming up here in a little bit, but whatever. For the most part, it's done. Well, it's bad. And we're going to preview Luis Castillo against Ryan Weathers. Before we get into all of that, though, let's run the intro graphic. Yay.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I love that thing. It's epic. But hey, welcome into today's Locked On Reds podcast. Today we got a loss to talk about, but before we talk about that, we have to celebrate Joseph Daniel Votto and his 1,000th RBI, a solo shot, absolute blast of a home run, and he is now in the 1,000th club. There's a lot of people that want to say that his Hall of Fame candidacy is on the fringe because of different counting numbers. Well, there you go. Milestone hit. He is one of only 5 Reds to reach the 1,000 RBI mark in a Reds uniform. He joins Frank Robinson, Johnny Bench, Pete Rose, and Tony Perez as the only guys to ever do it. Love it. Can't wait to see him in the Hall of Fame. We're going to talk about that a lot more ad nauseum on tomorrow's podcast, so I'm not going to go crazy with Joey Votto talk today because we got like a whole segment coming tomorrow, so get excited about that. But I did want to mention that before we talk about anything else about this game because, well, this game sucked. And the rain had a lot to do with that. The rain cut it short. They did not get a chance. There were 3 more innings to play, but Mother Nature unleashed her fury and all of the rain and the thunder and the lightning. You could hear all of it on the radio broadcast. I was actually producing the game at 700, and like whenever Tommy would come back to give you an update, you just heard rain in the background as if they had some sort of calming noise machine going. That's how loud it was. And I'm sure for the people there, they were not too happy about it. But 2 rain delays in this game, just not great overall, though. I mean, I love the fact that the bats got going early. You had the best case scenario for the top of the lineup, both Jonathan India and Jesse Winker get on, and then Nick Castellanos hits a 3-run home run. I'd love to draw that up every time we come around to the top of the order because that would be amazing, but we've got the talent to do that on this Reds lineup, and they showed it there, and then Joey's home run made it 4-zip. Actually, or made it 5-zip because Kyle Farmer had hit Joey Votto in the first inning via sac fly, and you felt good with 4-0, but then Guti was not Gucci last night. He survived for the most part until he was pulled after loading the bases there in the 5th inning. But it was frustrating to see because the Padres hit a lot of long balls. They had 4 home runs in this game, and that's why they won. That's why they won 7-5. I mean, Trent Grisham had 2 of those home runs. One of them was a grand slam off of Josh Osich, and it was frustrating to see because Guti never got into that rhythm that when you see it, you can understand the point of the game. In any Vladimir Gutierrez start, he gets into a groove, and the other team just is kept off balance pretty much for a long period of time. That never happened. And he was always pitching with runners on base. It seemed like the inning started and the Padres already had somebody on. It was just a stacked deck against him, and he was able to survive to the point that David Bell thought he'd seen enough, and he'd go to his bullpen. This is where I have questions, because if I'm a manager and I'm looking at the situation around Great American Ballpark, The weather sucks. There's probably a good chance that there's going to be a long rain delay, if not a call. I got to go big early. I got to bring in my best dude. And so far, and I know I've given this guy plenty of crap this year, but for his last 8 outings, Amir Garrett has been the best guy out of this bullpen. And if you wanted to bring in a lefty, Amir Garrett's a lefty. So why didn't they bring him in? Why did they bring in Josh Osich instead? And before you say, well, Jeff, Amir Garrett pitched yesterday. Yeah, so did Josh Osich. Everybody out of the bullpen pitched. So shouldn't everybody be on the same schedule? And Amir Garrett only threw a third of an inning. So that was one thing that I was kind of like, I don't get that. Josh Osich to this point had been okay. He hadn't pitched that much. And I was trying to will him into a decent bullpen pitcher, a guy that the Reds could count on. But let's be honest, he is one of many of these garage sale type relievers that Bob Castellini has attempted to sell the Reds fan base on. And I think we've all called his bluff because none of us are buying it. It's frustrating to see that in a game like that, where you're up by 2 with the bases loaded in the biggest point in that game so far, and you call on a dude who you just called up a couple of weeks ago. Not anybody that's been on this ride. You don't call on Amir. You don't call on Brad Brock. You don't even call on Heath Hembry, which that would have been rough anyway because he loves to give up homers too. But you don't lean on the guys who have gotten you there with Sims and Antone on the IL. So I don't understand that call. And then I look at this game too, and I really wish, I mean, obviously there's lots of what ifs with the rain calling it early, but being there in the 6th inning, we were coming around to the top of the lineup soon. I would have loved to have seen what they would have done again. Castellanos had an amazing game. Joey Votto had 2 hits to that point, a double and a homer. And Jesse Winker looked good too. He had a very long at-bat against Joe Musgrove that he worked a walk. I mean, the Reds did well against an impressive pitcher. I talked about how impressed I was with Joe Musgrove coming into the start, and the Reds lineup hit him. And, I mean, he had to throw 37 pitches in the first inning because of all those runs and great at-bats that the Reds were having. So I was very impressed with the way they handled it. It's literally, you look at one pitch thrown by your not best reliever that gives up a grand slam and gives up the game. And then the rain cuts it short. That's just another loss. I mean, it's another entry into the list of annoying, frustrating games that the Reds could have won but lost. And now they're starting to mount. It's the list is growing to the point that it's beginning to concern me. I hate, especially when it comes to my favorite teams, I hate calling any sort of doom and gloom because sports are about having fun. And especially when you're a fan, you just get to watch and have fun. So why watch with the mindset of, oh boy, they're done. It's July and they're done, which, by the way, happy July. Happy Bobby Bonilla Day. But yeah, I'm not calling that yet, but it's given me a sinking feeling. Hopefully that sinking feeling goes away. However, we're going to talk about why that sinking feeling continues, but the good news about it coming up here in just a minute. Before we get into that, though, I wanted to let you know that if you're looking for a part for your car, the best place to go is rockauto.com. They've got all of the parts your car will ever need, and they've got an easy-to-use interface to help you find exactly what that is. You don't have to know the name of it. You can just know the name of your car, find your make, find your model. There's a drop-down list on the left side of the screen, and then they pull up a list of all the parts for your car. It's like a multiple choice test in which all of the answers are correct. Check it out today at rockauto.com and find the part for your car. Whether you are an amateur who's just looking for a taillight, or if you're a professional who's restoring a classic car, they've got that part for you. Check them out. And when you're in the checkout section in the How'd You Hear About Us area, type in Locked On to let them know that your pal Jeff from the Locked On Reds podcast sent you. That's rockauto.com. And in the checkout section in the How'd You Hear About Us area, type in Locked On. Rockauto.com has all of the parts that your car will ever need. All right, so I kind of mentioned some not so good vibes there at the end of last segment. We're going to continue that feeling for just a minute, so bear with me. But these are stats that you need to know, because when we look at this season, when we look back on what the season that is, hopefully we're looking back on a season where the Reds made the playoffs, and we can say they made the playoffs in spite of these numbers. But if we get to the end of the season and the Reds are out of it, this series of games, the Reds versus the NL West, is going to be the straw that broke that camel's back, because so far they've played 29 games against the West, and they're 9-20. In 253 and 2/3 innings pitched, the Reds have a 5.9 ERA. And a lot of that has to do with defense. I know that ERA factors in defense, and the Reds' defense has been bad for much of the year, and they've shown some not so great performances against the likes of the Diamondbacks and the Rockies and things like that. Yeah, and that's not wrong either. They've given up 19 unearned runs in their 29 games against the NL West. Plus, when you break it down, and I know that there are plenty of peripherals. I talk about peripheral stats all the time, sabermetrics, analytics, what have you. But the basic numbers, runs scored versus runs allowed. And in fact, we'll flip that, because the Reds have allowed a total, this is unearned and earned, they've allowed a total of 185 runs to NL West teams in those 29 games, and they've scored 134. If you're doing math at home, they've been outscored by 51 by the NL West. In fact, the most concerning thing is not even necessarily the Padres. It's the 6 games against Arizona, who outscored them 47-29. After the final game against the Diamondbacks, they when they won 11 or 16 to whatever, it was a bad score. 14-11, I think, is what that score was. But whenever the Diamondbacks won that game, their record set at 9-10. They were one game under 500. I don't know if you've seen lately, the Diamondbacks became the first team in the major leagues to lose 60 games. They're 22-60. So at the 19-game mark, they were one game under 500. 5 of those wins had come against the Reds. Oh, well, that is definitely going to be a series that we look back on and say that if the Reds had flip-flopped this a little bit, which they totally could have done because Arizona's a terrible team, then we would have been sitting pretty. The Reds also, when you look at their series this year against the NL West, can point to at least, no less than 7 games with the Padres and Giants that were 1 or 2 run losses. We always talked about in years past the Reds' record in 1-run games, but I'll even expand it with that with 2-run games, because even a 2-run game is attainable in your final at bat. And there was even one-run loss against the Diamondbacks. So that's a lot of games just against teams from the NL West that you can point to and say they could have won that game. And the saddest part about the fact of the Reds' record is that against the NL West, I told you that, against everyone else, against every other team that's not in the NL West, they're 14 games over 500. That's how good this team has been. Not 14 games. They're a lot better than 9-20. You're going to look back on this season, and come what may, you're going to hope that if the Reds make the playoffs, it's not going to be against an NL West team, which is most likely going to happen because we're looking at an NL West division leader that's going to make the playoffs, and we're probably going to see both NL wildcard teams coming out of the West. So it's going to be a struggle. I'm looking forward to seeing how the Reds can bounce back from this, and the fact that today is the last game against the Padres, so they won't have to worry about that. The Padres seem to have just some sort of hold over the Reds this season. All right, speaking of the last game against the Padres, we're going to preview that game. It's Luis Castillo against David Weathers' son. Okay, his name is Ryan Weathers, and he doesn't go by David Weathers' son. But if you ask anybody around the Reds, when you're talking about media types, they're all saying David Weathers' son. So we're going to preview that here in just a minute. Before we jump into that, though, I wanted to let you know that you can make some money off your sports knowledge at betonline.ag. You go there, you set up your profile, and you type in the promo code Locked On. You'll get 50% added onto your initial deposit. And I've got a tip for you today. I talk about I always try to give you a tip every so often to help make you a couple of bucks. I got a feeling today the Rockies and the Cardinals are starting a series in Colorado. I told you, and we've gone to the well a couple of times with this, but I've told you about that voodoo magic that the Colorado Rockies have at Coors Field. They are home underdogs, plus 110 against Adam Wainwright and the Cardinals. They've got Antonio Senzatella on the mound tonight. And yeah, I know there's that weird feeling because they gave Nolan Arenado to the Cardinals, so maybe the Cardinals have some kind of hold over them. That voodoo magic Coors Field is going to come through. Take the Rockies money line plus 110. That'll get you a couple of bucks. Type in the promo code Locked On when you set up your profile. That'll get you a couple of more bucks, 50% more added onto your initial deposit to be precise, and you'll make some money off your sports knowledge. You can check out lines on the MLB, the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs, golf, MMA, boxing, reality TV, all of that good stuff is all at betonline.ag. So set up your profile today and type in the promo code Locked On to get 50% added onto your initial deposit. All right, so last game of the series against the Padres. Last game of the season, supposing that the rain holds up. Luis Castillo against Ryan Weathers. La Piedra has been back here recently in his last 5 starts. He has 31 2/3 innings pitched to a 1.71 ERA. That is more like it. That's the guy that we know and love. 32 strikeouts, 12 walks in those 5 starts, and opponents have a 497 OPS, on base plus slugging, 497 against him in those 5 games. Now, albeit that's with a 234 BABIP, so getting a little bit lucky, but La Piedra has been dominant here recently. Looking forward to seeing what he can do against the Padres. Probably the most laborious of his last 5 starts were in San Diego, so we'll see if the Padres continue to put the pressure on him today. We saw it yesterday. They're a home run hitting team, and they are in a home run hitting ballpark. So hopefully Castillo can keep it in the yard, keep it on the ground, and preferably keep the strikeouts on the board and the pizza in our bellies. All right, well, he's not going to feed the pizza to us, but yeah, whatever. Hopefully he pitches great, and the lineup continues to produce, because the lineup was not the problem yesterday. It was the pitching. Then we look on the other side of the field. We look coming out of the Padres dugout to begin the game is going to be David Weathers' son. Ryan Weathers this season has had his ups and downs. He's been in and out of the bullpen. You're going to see the ERA and you're going to be impressed. I'm going to caution you against that because his expected stats are a little bit not bullish on what Weathers has done. In fact, we've talked about it with Vladimir Gutierrez being a thing. It's kind of with Ryan Weathers as well. His expected ERA is over 2 runs higher than his current ERA, and his expected ERA is 4.71. He does give up a lot of hard contact, 45% on the hard contact rate, and average exit velocity against him is just a tick above 90 miles an hour. I've always said it before, the league average is 88.3, so that's above league average. Hopefully the Reds can take advantage of it. He does not walk a lot of guys, so probably being aggressive is the way to go for the Reds lineup today. I know here in days past, I've been saying, man, be patient, make the pitcher work, get the pitch count up. With Weathers, he only averages around 4 innings a start, and he's been pitching out of the bullpen some, so I'm not expecting the Padres to really stretch him out. It'll be interesting to see how the lineup fares against him, though, because he's a lefty. So all of this good stuff might be moot. One interesting thing to note as well, when you look at the numbers on Ryan Weathers, with runners in scoring position, he has some crazy stats. He's only given up 2 hits in 20 at-bats with runners in scoring position. He only given up 4 runs. One of those hits was a double. However, he has gotten insanely lucky in that tiny sample size because he has a BABIP allowed of 118. So maybe that means he's due, and maybe that means the Reds can capitalize on the fact that he's due. But, when you look at this game overall, though, it's weirdly scheduled. I don't understand a 7-10 start for Reds and Padres in the final game of a series. But when I see the fact that it's the final game against the Padres, this isn't the best attitude to have, but let's just get it over with. Yeah, I think that we can't go back and change the past, so we can't go back and change any of those games that the Reds have lost already to the Padres. So get a win. And if you happen to lose this game too, whatever. We're done with the Padres. That's kind of how I look at it. All right, that's really all I have. Hopefully, the weather holds up. It's raining right now, so hopefully it changes, and they actually get this game in. But like I said, 7:10 start time. This is not a getaway game day. Kind of weird for the Padres. They're going to Philadelphia after this, which you're going to say, Jeff, that's not that far of a trip, but they're going to start a game at 7:10 tonight that has the chance to at least have some kind of rain delay, which means this might be a late night game for them. And then their first game in Philadelphia tomorrow begins at 6:10. So they might have a quick turnaround. This could be interesting for them. Reds, again, obviously at home against the Cubs tomorrow. We'll preview that game. We'll talk about Joey Votto a little bit and some Jeff's Junk Mail on tomorrow's podcast. Make sure you tune in. Make sure you watch, subscribe, follow, all of that good stuff. And follow me on Twitter at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs and the show at Locked On Reds. And save the Locked On Reds line number into your phone at 513-549-0159. That'll do it for us here today, though. Thank you so much for watching and listening to the Locked On Reds podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Carr. I will talk to each and every one of you tomorrow.